The banquet hall of the Sanderson Federal Building gleamed under crystal chandeliers. 30 years of service to his country had culminated in this moment for Boyd Mercer. His retirement party was filled with colleagues from the Department of Defense. Officially, he had been a logistics specialist who never left his desk. The truth was something else entirely. Boyd adjusted his tie as he surveyed the room. His wife, Diana, smiled at him from across the hall, as beautiful as ever at 57, though the smile never quite reached her eyes anymore. Their son, Aaron, stood beside her, 28, and uncomfortable in his suit. Something about Aaron's demeanor had been off all evening. Speech, speech. Someone called out, and others joined in. Boyd stepped to the front where a 3-tiered cake awaited him. 30 years, he began, his voice carrying the easy authority that had served him well through his career. 30 years of service to this great nation. I want to thank. Aaron appeared beside him, reaching for the cake knife to assist. As they positioned it together at the top tier, Aaron leaned in close. "Dad, I never wanted to be part of this," he whispered, his voice trembling. Boyd's hand tightened on the knife. "Part of what?" he asked without moving his lips, maintaining his smile for the crowd. Before Aaron could answer, Diana approached the small podium. She had always been the socialite between them, comfortable in the spotlight while Boyd preferred the shadows. "If everyone could give me your attention," she said, tapping the microphone. The feedback cut through conversations, and the room fell silent. "There's something about my husband's career you all should hear." Boyd felt a chill that had nothing to do with the air conditioning. For 30 years, he had maintained his cover flawlessly. What could Diana possibly know? Before she could continue, the building's alarm system erupted in a piercing wail. Red lights flashed from the ceiling. Most guests looked confused, but Boyd recognized the pattern. It wasn't a fire alarm. It was a security breach. Within seconds, men and women in dark suits appeared at every doorway. Boyd recognized several operatives from his department, individuals who officially didn't exist. The guests murmured in confusion. Director Sylvia Rollins stepped forward, her face impassive as always. She placed a classified folder with red striping on the table beside the cake. The folder bore the marking, Operation Cold Shade. Eyes only. "I apologize for the interruption," she announced to the crowd. "Security protocol. Nothing to worry about." Boyd knew better. That folder wasn't supposed to exist anymore. Not after Belgrade. And that's when it happened. Diana pulled a small handgun from her purse. "Nobody moves," she commanded, her socialite persona evaporating in an instant. She aimed the weapon at Boyd. "Especially not you, darling." The guests gasped. Some ducked under tables. The security personnel tensed, but didn't draw their weapons. 30 years of lying," Diana said, her voice steady. "Did you think I wouldn't figure it out? That folder contains the truth about who you really are, Boyd. Or should I call you the handler?" Boyd's mind raced. How long had she known? And more importantly, who was she working for? "Mom, what are you doing?" Aaron cried out, genuine confusion on his face. "Stay back, Aaron," Diana warned. "Your father isn't who you think he is. He isn't who any of us thought he was." Boyd's eyes met Director Rollins'. A silent communication passed between them. This was not part of any protocol. This was something else entirely. "Diana," Boyd said calmly, "you don't want to do this." "You don't know what I want," she replied. "For the first time in our marriage, you have no idea what I'm thinking." The guests remained frozen in place as agents slowly began to encircle the confrontation. Boyd noticed Aaron backing away, reaching for his phone. "Put the gun down, Mrs. Mercer," Director Rollins said firmly. "Not until everyone knows the truth." Diana's hand trembled slightly. "Not until everyone knows that the man they're celebrating tonight is responsible for." The lights went out. In the momentary darkness, Boyd moved with a precision that belied his 60 years. When emergency lighting kicked on 3 seconds later, he had disarmed Diana and had her pinned against him, the gun now in his hand. "I think," he said quietly to the stunned room. "This party is over." Boyd sat in an interrogation room deep within the Sanderson building, watching Diana through one-way glass as she was questioned in an adjacent chamber. She sat rigid in her chair, refusing to speak without a lawyer. The woman across from him bore little resemblance to the person he'd shared a bed with for 31 years. Director Rollins entered with 2 cups of coffee, sliding one toward Boyd. "How long have you known?" Boyd asked without looking up. "That your wife was compromised. We weren't certain until tonight." Rollins took a seat. "The question is, how long has she known about you?" Boyd's mind traveled back through decades of operations. Officially, he was a mid-level bureaucrat who processed acquisition requests for military bases. In reality, Boyd Mercer was the handler, one of the most effective, deep-cover operatives the nation had ever produced. "Operation Cold Shade," Boyd said, tapping the red-striped folder on the table. "Someone leaked it to her. That operation was buried 20 years ago." "Belgrade." Rollins nodded. 4 agents lost, 2,000 civilian casualties. "An unfortunate necessity," Boyd replied without emotion. "We prevented a nuclear exchange." Some might disagree with that assessment. Those people don't have all the facts. The door opened again, and Aaron was escorted in by 2 agents. His face was pale, his expression wounded. "Dad, what in the world is going on?" he demanded. "Why are they holding Mom? Why are they treating us like criminals?" Boyd studied his son, searching for any sign of deception. "That's what we need to find out, Aaron. Your mother brought a weapon to a federal facility with apparent intent to expose classified information. She said you've been lying to us our whole lives," Aaron said, his voice breaking. "That your real job isn't what you told us." Boyd exchanged a glance with Rollins, who gave an almost imperceptible nod. "Sit down, son," Boyd said. For the next hour, Boyd explained a sanitized version of his career. That he had indeed worked for the Department of Defense, but in a capacity that required absolute secrecy. That his work had saved countless American lives. That the secrecy had been to protect them. What he didn't tell Aaron was about the tough operations, the assassinations, the regime changes, and the decisions that haunted lesser men, but that Boyd had made without hesitation because he believed they were necessary. "So everything was a lie," Aaron finally said. "Our whole family life." "Not everything," Boyd replied, "just the parts that needed to be." Aaron shook his head. "And Mom, what's going to happen to her?" "That depends," Rollins interjected, "on who she's working for and what she knows." A junior agent entered, whispering something to Rollins. Her expression darkened. "What is it?" Boyd asked. "We found something in your home office," Rollins said. "Hidden surveillance equipment. High-end. Government grade." Boyd's jaw tightened. "Diana?" "Possibly. But there's more." Rollins hesitated. "We tracked an encrypted transmission from your home network. It was sent this morning to an IP address in Moscow." "Russia," Aaron exclaimed. "That's crazy. Mom's not a spy." Boyd remained silent, processing the information. For years, he had suspected Diana's occasional unexplained absences weren't entirely related to her charity work. But Russian intelligence, it seemed too obvious. "There's one more thing," Rollins said. "We found evidence of regular payments to an account in Aaron's name. Payments originating from a shell company we've linked to Russian intelligence." Boyd turned slowly to his son, whose face had gone from pale to ashen. "Dad? I swear I don't know anything about that," Aaron stammered. "The first payment was made when Aaron turned 18, Rollins continued, roughly when he would have gained access to his own accounts without parental oversight." Boyd's mind worked rapidly, assembling the pieces. Diana had been spying on him, possibly for years. But Aaron, his own son. "I want a polygraph," Aaron said suddenly. "Right now. I'll prove I don't know anything about this." Boyd studied his son's face, looking for the micro-expressions that would betray deception. After 30 years in the field, he could spot a lie at 50 paces. What he saw in Aaron's eyes wasn't deception. It was fear. "That won't be necessary," Boyd said. "Director, I'd like a moment alone with my son." Rollins looked skeptical, but nodded, leaving the room. "Dad, you have to believe me," Aaron said the moment they were alone. "I had nothing to do with this." Boyd leaned forward. "Then why did you say you never wanted to be part of this?" Aaron swallowed hard. "Because I found something last week. I was helping Mom clear out your home office for the retirement, and I found an old flash drive. I thought it might have family photos, but there were documents. Operation Cold Shade. Pictures of dead people. Your name was all over it. And you told your mother." "Of course I told her. I thought maybe you were being blackmailed or something. I never imagined." Aaron trailed off. "She told me to forget about it, to never mention it. But then today, she was acting so strange." Boyd processed this. If Aaron was telling the truth, then Diana had already known about Cold Shade before Aaron found the drive. She had been protecting her operation. "Aaron, I need you to think carefully. Has your mother ever introduced you to people she met through her charity work? Anyone who took a special interest in you or your career?" Aaron hesitated. "There was this one guy, Victor something. Russian accent. Mom said he was a major donor. He helped me get my job at Halbright Technologies." Boyd's blood ran cold. Victor Petrov was a known SVR officer. "What exactly do you do at Halbright, Aaron?" "You know what I do, Dad. I'm in cybersecurity. And Halbright has contracts with the Defense Department, don't they?" The realization dawned on Aaron's face. "They'd wanted me for access," he whispered. "They were using me to get to classified networks." Boyd stood, straightening his tie. "It appears so. What happens now?" "Now," Boyd said with quiet determination, "I find out exactly how deep this goes." The next 24 hours passed in a blur of interrogations and revelations. Boyd watched from behind glass as skilled interrogators questioned Diana. She maintained her silence until her lawyer arrived, a high-priced attorney who specialized in espionage cases, the kind of lawyer no ordinary housewife would know to call. As Boyd had suspected, Diana finally broke her silence, not to deny the accusations, but to request immunity in exchange for information. Her lawyer spoke of coercion and patriotic intentions misunderstood. By evening, the picture was becoming clearer. Diana Mercer, née Weaver, had been recruited by Russian intelligence during a study abroad program in her college years, long before she met Boyd. Their marriage had not been arranged by her handlers. But once they discovered who she had fallen for, they saw an opportunity. For 30 years, she had been passing information about Boyd's activities to her handlers. Low level at first, but increasingly valuable, as Boyd rose through the ranks. The discovery of Operation Cold Shade had been her crown jewel. Evidence of a covert action that, if exposed, would damage American interests and potentially lead to Boyd's prosecution in international courts. Aaron, meanwhile, had been vetted by multiple agencies and placed under surveillance. Initial investigations suggested he was telling the truth, an unwitting pawn in his mother's game. The accounts in his name had been set up without his knowledge. The money never touched. Boyd reviewed the evidence file in Rollins's office, his face betraying nothing of the storm within. 31 years, he said finally. 3 decades of marriage, and I never suspected a thing. Rollins raised an eyebrow. Never? The great handler never once thought his wife might be playing the same game. Boyd's silence was answer enough. "What do you want to do?" Rollins asked. "What are my options?" Officially, Diana will be charged with espionage. Given the evidence, she'll likely make a deal to avoid a life sentence. Aaron will be cleared but will remain under surveillance for years. You'll receive a generous pension and a quiet retirement, with the gratitude of a nation that can never publicly acknowledge what you've done. And unofficially, Rollins hesitated. "Boyd, you're retiring. This isn't your operation anymore." "Sylvia," Boyd said, using her first name for perhaps the second time in their 20-year association, "my family has been compromised by foreign intelligence. My retirement party was crashed by my own wife pulling a gun on me. I think we're past official protocols." Rollins sighed. "There's a theory that Diana isn't working directly for the Russians anymore. Some of the recent communication patterns suggest she may have gone independent, selling to the highest bidder. If that's true, there could be other players involved." "Like who?" "We've detected increased chatter from a private intelligence firm called Argent Security. They've been recruiting former intelligence officers from various agencies worldwide. Their founder is Nolan Voss." Boyd finished. "I know him." "You would. He was your asset in Sarajevo before he went private." Boyd remembered Voss. Brilliant, ruthless, and perpetually dissatisfied with operating within government constraints. They'd worked together on multiple operations before Voss left to form his own security company. "You think Voss turned Diana?" "We think he made her a better offer. Voss has been building something big. Some kind of database of compromising information on officials worldwide. A blackmail operation on a scale we've never seen. And Operation Cold Shade would be valuable for that," Boyd mused. "Extremely. But here's where it gets worse," Rollins continued. "We think Diana was planning to publicly expose you tonight, but not for ideological reasons. It was a distraction." "From what?" "Aaron's position at Halbright gives him access to a Defense Department quantum encryption project. We believe Voss planned to use the chaos of your exposure to cover a major breach of that system tonight." Boyd processed this information. "So my wife was willing to destroy me to help Voss steal military secrets. It appears so. And now Voss knows the operation is blown. Diana is in custody, but he still wants that encryption technology." Boyd stood, straightening his jacket. "Then he'll try another approach." "Boyd," Rollins warned, "you're not authorized for fieldwork anymore. As of yesterday, you're retired." Boyd smiled thinly. "Then it's fortunate that what I'm about to do won't be on behalf of any government agency." "What exactly are you planning?" "To finish my retirement party properly," Boyd replied. With a bang. Boyd's townhouse in Georgetown felt different now. He moved through the rooms with a tactical awareness he'd never needed at home before. Every family photo, every piece of furniture now held a double meaning. The facade of normalcy that had concealed 30 years of deception. In the master bedroom, he opened Diana's closet and breathed in her perfume. Chanel No. 5, her signature for decades. Had that been real at least? Or another calculated choice to maintain her cover? He began a methodical search, examining floorboards, light fixtures, air vents, anywhere surveillance equipment might be hidden. By midnight, he'd found 3 more devices that the initial sweep had missed. Professional grade. Expensive. Boyd didn't disable them. Instead, he sat on the edge of the bed they'd shared and spoke clearly. "I know you're listening, Nolan. You always were thorough." He paused, knowing that somewhere recordings were being made, analyzed. "You turned my wife, manipulated my son, and now you want me to believe it's just about some encryption technology. I taught you better than that." Boyd stood, moving to the window that overlooked the quiet street. "I'm going to find you. And when I do, we'll finish what we started in Sarajevo." He disabled the devices then, crushing each one methodically. For the next hour, he continued his search of the house, looking not for surveillance, but for Diana's secrets. In their 31 years together, she must have left some trace of her true self. In her private study, behind a false panel in her antique desk that even the federal agents had missed, he found it. A small leather-bound journal. Inside were entries dating back decades, written in a cipher that Boyd recognized as a modified Vigenère, an encryption method he himself had taught her for emergency communications, if anything ever happened to him. It took him 3 hours to decode the first entry. September 4, 1992. "Today, I married the enemy. He is kind, brilliant, and completely devoted to a system that will eventually collapse. I must remember my purpose. Sentiment is a luxury I cannot afford." Boyd felt a cold fury as he read further entries, documenting his career milestones alongside her handler meetings. Their son's birth was recorded with clinical detachment. Asset now has increased vulnerability through child. Recommend continued deep cover operation. By dawn, Boyd had decoded enough to confirm what he suspected. Diana had never loved him. Every moment of their marriage had been an operation to her. Every intimacy, every shared joy, every whispered secret, all weaponized and transmitted to her handlers. But the final entries suggested Rollins was right. 2 years ago, the tone had changed. Approached by V, offered to go independent. Higher compensation, lower risk. Moscow unhappy but powerless to stop transition. New target acquisition. Quantum key protocol at Halbright. Using ace placement as access vector. Using their son. That was unforgivable. Boyd's phone rang. A secure line. "We have a problem," Rollins said without preamble. Diana's lawyer got a judge to grant her conditional release in house arrest pending charges. What judge would possibly? Judge Frederick Turnbull. His son has a gambling problem and suddenly paid off $2 million in debts last week. Voss, Boyd said. He's got something on the judge. Almost certainly. But it gets worse. Aaron is missing. Boyd's grip tightened on the phone. Since when? He left the safe house this morning. Said he was getting coffee. Never came back. His tracking device was found in a trash can 2 blocks away. He ran or was taken. We're reviewing surveillance footage. But Voss is too good for that, Boyd finished. He's making his move. Boyd, we're mounting an official response. I need you to stay out of this for your own protection. Of course, Boyd lied smoothly. Keep me updated. He ended the call and immediately moved to his office, behind a painting of the Georgetown waterfront. He opened a wall safe that not even Diana had known about. Inside was a go bag containing cash, multiple identities, and a Glock 19 with suppressor. Within 15 minutes, Boyd had changed into nondescript clothing and was driving a 10-year-old Honda Civic registered to one of his cover identities. 2 hours later, he walked into a storage facility in Arlington and accessed a unit he'd maintained for emergencies. Inside was everything he needed. Surveillance equipment, weapons, communication devices untraceable to any agency, and files. Lots of files. Boyd pulled the one marked Voss and began to read. Nolan Voss, former CIA field operative, had worked with Boyd on operations in Eastern Europe during the 1990s. Brilliant but unstable, Voss had eventually been pushed into early retirement after an unsanctioned operation in Georgia led to civilian casualties. He'd founded Argent Security 5 years later, initially providing legitimate protection services to corporations and wealthy individuals. But intelligence suggested Voss had gradually expanded into gray areas: corporate espionage, political blackmail, and weapons technology theft. Boyd had kept tabs on his former colleague over the years, partly out of professional curiosity, and partly because he'd never quite trusted Voss's stability. Now those files might save Aaron's life. According to Boyd's latest intelligence, Argent maintained a training facility in rural Virginia, disguised as a corporate retreat center. If Voss had Aaron, that's where he would take him. Close enough to Washington to move quickly, remote enough to operate without scrutiny. Boyd loaded what he needed into the Civic and headed west. As he drove, he considered the players in this game. Diana was under house arrest, but would be communicating with Voss somehow. Aaron was either a hostage or a willing participant. Boyd still wasn't entirely convinced of his son's innocence. And then there was Kendrick Foster, Voss's second-in-command and former British intelligence. Boyd had crossed paths with Foster in Istanbul years ago, an operation that left Foster with a distinctive limp and a profound hatred for Boyd. Boyd's phone rang again, an unknown number. "Mercer," he answered. "Hello, handler." Nolan Voss's smooth voice brought Boyd back 20 years. "Retirement doesn't suit you." "Where's my son, Nolan?" "Safe for now. Confused about his parentage, though. Finding out your father is an international assassin and your mother is a spy can be quite the identity crisis. What do you want? Always direct. I've missed that about you. Voss chuckled. What I want is simple. The complete cold shade files. Not the redacted version in that folder at your party. The real files with all the names, dates, and locations. Those files were destroyed years ago. We both know that's not true. A man like you always keeps insurance. Boyd remained silent. Here's my offer, Voss continued. The complete cold shade files in exchange for your son's life. You have 12 hours. I want proof of life. There was a pause. Then Aaron's voice came on the line. Dad, I swear I didn't. The call ended. Boyd accelerated, pushing the Civic faster toward Virginia. Voss wanted the cold shade files because they contained more than just the Belgrade operation. They detailed a network of assets, officials, and operatives across Eastern Europe, many of whom were still in positions of power. With that information, Voss could blackmail dozens of high-level targets. And Boyd did have the complete files, not in any government facility, but in a safety deposit box in Zurich. The question wasn't whether he could get them. It was whether he was willing to sacrifice that network to save his son. As he drove, Boyd made another call to a number few people knew existed. Authentication Bravo 7 Delta Tango, he said when the line connected. A pause, then. Authentication accepted. How can I help, handler? I need a team. Off the books. Operation Cold Shade is compromised. Understood. Assets available in your sector include Falcon, Meridian, and Whiskey. Boyd considered. Activate Falcon and Meridian. Have them meet me at the contingency point in 3 hours. Acknowledged. Anything else? Boyd thought of Diana, sitting comfortably under house arrest while their son was in danger. Yes, I need surveillance on subject Dancer. Full spectrum, maximum discretion. Dancer has federal protection, 2 agents at the residence. I'm aware. Do it anyway. Understood. Handler out. Boyd ended the call, knowing he had just activated resources that officially didn't exist. A shadow team he built over decades for precisely this type of situation. Operatives loyal to him personally, not to any agency or government. As he crossed into Virginia, Boyd allowed himself a grim smile. Nolan Voss thought he was dealing with a retired bureaucrat forced into espionage. He was about to rediscover who the handler really was. The rural Virginia countryside rolled past Boyd's window as dusk approached. He turned onto an unmarked gravel road that wound through dense forest, eventually arriving at a hunting cabin that appeared abandoned. 2 vehicles were already parked behind it, a mud-spattered pickup truck and a late-model SUV with government plates. Inside, 2 individuals waited. Meredith Kwan, Falcon, sat cleaning a disassembled rifle with methodical precision. At 45, she had the toned physique of someone half her age and the eyes of someone who had seen too much. Former Delta Force, now officially an intelligence analyst, Kwan specialized in extraction operations. Leaning against the wall was Dominique Rousseau, Meridian, a communications and cyber specialist whose round face and perpetual 5 o'clock shadow masked one of the sharpest minds in the intelligence community. At 38, he was the youngest of Boyd's private team. Handler, Kwan acknowledged without looking up from her rifle. Been a while. Not long enough if you're calling us in, Rousseau added, typing rapidly on a laptop. I thought you were retired as of yesterday. Circumstances changed, Boyd replied, laying out his equipment on the cabin's worn table. My son has been taken by Nolan Voss. Both operatives stiffened. They knew the name. Argent Security, Rousseau said. They've been on every agency's radar for years, but no one can pin anything concrete on them. Because Voss knows how we operate, Boyd explained. He was one of us. What's his play? Kwan asked, reassembling her rifle with swift, practiced movements. He wants the complete cold shade files. Rousseau whistled. Those are supposed to be destroyed. Most copies were, Boyd acknowledged. But Voss knows I'd keep contingencies. And do you have them? Quan asked directly. Boyd nodded. In Zurich. But that's not our immediate concern. Right now, we need to locate where Voss is holding Aaron. Rousseau turned his laptop around, displaying satellite imagery of an expansive compound nestled in the Virginia countryside. Argent's training facility. 20 armed security personnel at all times. State-of-the-art surveillance. If he's holding your son anywhere in the region, it's there. We need confirmation, Boyd said. Meridian, can you get us eyes inside? Rousseau grinned. Already working on it. Argent uses a proprietary security system, but they can track their IT infrastructure maintenance. I've been ghosting their network for the past hour. Any signs of Aaron? Not yet, but I've only accessed the outer perimeter systems. The main facility has air-gap security. No external connections. Boyd considered their options. Quan, you'll handle reconnaissance. Get close enough to confirm Aaron's presence, but maintain absolute deniability. And if I confirm? Quan asked. Then we plan extraction. Against 20 armed operators with tactical training. Quan raised an eyebrow. Even for you, that's ambitious. We're not going to fight them, Boyd explained. We're going to use Voss's playbook against him. As they began planning, Boyd's secure phone buzzed with a message from his surveillance team on Diana. Subject has visitor. Identity confirmed. Viktor Petrov. So Diana's original Russian handler was still in play. Interesting. A second message followed. Federal agents called away on emergency. Subject and visitor alone in residence. Boyd's jaw tightened. Someone had deliberately created a distraction to remove Diana's protection detail. This operation was getting more complicated by the minute. Change of plans, he announced. Meridian, continue working on Argent systems. Falcon, you're with me. Where are we going? Quan asked, already gathering her equipment. To have a conversation with my wife. Diana Mercer sat in her living room, a glass of white wine in hand, as she conversed with the silver-haired man across from her, Viktor Petrov, cultural attaché to the Russian embassy and longtime SVR officer. He looked perfectly at ease in the home he had been monitoring for decades. Your accommodations could be worse, Petrov observed in his lightly accented English. House arrest in a Georgetown townhouse is hardly suffering. It's temporary, Diana replied. Once Nolan has what he needs, all charges will mysteriously disappear, and you trust him to keep his word. Diana smiled thinly. I trust his self-interest. He needs me for phase 2. The Russians are displeased, Petrov said casually. 30 years of investment, and you simply change allegiance. The world changed, Victor. Your people still think in terms of Cold War politics. Nolan understands that power today isn't about nations. It's about information. Petrov nodded thoughtfully. And what information do you think your husband will provide to save your son? The cold shade files. Complete and unredacted. And if he refuses? Diana's expression hardened. He won't. For all his ruthlessness in the field, Boyd has one weakness. Family. It's why I was such an effective asset all these years. Was he ever suspicious? Never, Diana said with a hint of pride. The great handler, who could spot a double agent across a crowded room, never once looked at his own wife. Perhaps, a voice said from the doorway, because I never imagined someone could sustain a lie for 31 years. Diana's wine glass shattered on the floor as she jerked to her feet. Boyd Mercer stood in the entrance to the living room, a silenced pistol aimed casually at Petrov. Hello, Victor, Boyd said calmly. Cultural attaché suits you better than your previous cover as a trade representative. Petrov remained seated, his composure remarkable. Boyd Mercer, I've waited decades to meet you properly. You'll forgive me if I don't offer you a drink. Boyd stepped into the room, maintaining his aim. Where's my son? Ask your wife, Petrov suggested. She's the one who arranged his recruitment. Boyd's gaze shifted to Diana, whose initial shock had transformed into cool calculation. "You weren't supposed to be here," she said. "The federal agents recalled away on a false emergency," Boyd finished. "Basic tradecraft, Diana. I'm disappointed." "What are you going to do, Boyd? Kill us? That would be rather conspicuous for a man in your position." "My position," Boyd repeated. "You mean as a retired bureaucrat whose wife betrayed him, or as the handler whose family has been compromised by hostile intelligence?" Diana's eyes narrowed. "You always did compartmentalize well. Where is Aaron?" "Safe," Diana said, her tone measured. "For now, Nolan is prepared to release him unharmed in exchange for the cold shade files." "And you believe that?" "It's a straightforward transaction." Boyd laughed, a sound devoid of humor. "Nothing involving Nolan Voss is straightforward. You should know that by now." "He wants the files more than he wants revenge," Diana insisted. "What he wants," Boyd said coldly, "is to destroy the network I spent decades building. The cold shade files contain the identities of over 30 deep cover assets across Eastern Europe and Russia. People who trusted me with their lives. People who helped you commit terrible acts," Diana countered. "Belgrade wasn't a necessary evil, Boyd. It was a massacre orchestrated by you. You don't have the clearance to understand what Belgrade prevented." "I understand enough," Diana shot back. "I've lived with the architect of those deaths for 30 years, slept beside him, raised a child with him." Boyd's expression remained impassive, but something flickered in his eyes. "And yet you never once confronted me, never questioned, never hesitated to play the devoted wife. Tell me, Diana, was any of it real? Any moment in 31 years?" For the first time, Diana's composure faltered. "Would it matter if I said yes?" "No," Boyd admitted, "but I'm curious how deep your deception goes." Petrov shifted slightly in his chair, drawing Boyd's attention back to him. "Your wife is a remarkable woman," the Russian said. "One of our most valuable assets, but I think you already know that her loyalty has evolved." "To Voss," Boyd said. "Among others." Petrov shrugged. "The modern intelligence landscape is fluid. Your wife adapted better than most." Boyd stepped closer, his gun unwavering. "I'm going to ask one more time. Where is my son?" "At the Argent compound," Diana answered. "In their secure wing. Nolan is keeping him comfortable, but isolated." "Is he part of this willingly?" Diana hesitated. "Aaron never knew about my work. But Nolan persuaded him that cooperating was in everyone's best interest." "Persuaded how?" "Nothing permanent," Diana assured him. "But Nolan can be very convincing when necessary." Boyd's finger tightened almost imperceptibly on the trigger. "If Aaron is harmed in any way, then deliver the files," Diana interrupted. "That's all Nolan wants." "No," Boyd said. "The files are just the beginning. What happens after I hand them over?" "What's phase 2 that you mentioned, Victor?" Diana glanced at Petrov, who remained impressively calm for a man with a gun pointed at him. "Insurance," she said finally. "The files provide leverage over key European security officials. With that leverage, Argent can access specific military installations housing tactical nuclear devices." Boyd's expression didn't change, but his mind raced. "Voss is going into the nuclear blackmail business." "Not blackmail," Diana corrected. "Realignment. Some nations shouldn't have such weapons. Others should have more. Nolan is merely adjusting the balance. By stealing nuclear weapons. By transferring them to more responsible parties." "And you support this?" Diana met his gaze evenly. "I support a world where power isn't concentrated in the hands of a few nations who believe themselves exceptional." Boyd nodded slowly, as if finally understanding something. "You never were working for Russia, or Voss. This is your operation." Diana smiled thinly. "I learned from the best, darling." For a moment, the room was silent, except for the ticking of the antique clock on the mantel, a wedding gift from Diana's parents all those years ago. "I'm going to get our son back," Boyd said finally. And then you and I are going to have a long overdue conversation about our marriage. You're not going to kill us?" Petrov asked, seeming genuinely curious. "Not today," Boyd replied. "Diana and Victor have federal charges pending. Their sudden deaths would only complicate matters." "How thoughtful," Diana said dryly. Boyd backed toward the door. "Don't try to warn Voss. My associate outside has disabled all communications from this house. Any attempt to leave will be discouraged." "Boyd," Diana called as he reached the doorway, "the cold shade files won't be enough anymore. Nolan knows you'll try something. He's prepared." "I'm counting on it," Boyd replied, and disappeared into the darkening evening. Aaron Mercer sat in a sparsely furnished room staring at the ceiling. No windows, one door with an electronic lock, and a surveillance camera in the corner. For the past 36 hours, he had been Nolan Voss's guest at the Argent Security compound. They had treated him well enough. Regular meals, access to a bathroom, even a few books. But the questions were relentless. Questions about his father's habits, routines, possible storage locations. Questions about childhood memories that might hint at secret catches or contingency plans. Aaron had answered truthfully, partly because he didn't know enough to lie effectively, and partly because Voss's methods of encouragement were persuasive. The man hadn't physically harmed him, but his threats carried absolute conviction. "Your father is not who you think he is," Voss had explained during their first conversation. "The handler is responsible for more deaths than most terrorist organizations. He's just had government sanction for his actions." Aaron hadn't wanted to believe it, but the evidence Voss presented was compelling. Photographs, reports, testimonies from survivors of operations his father had orchestrated. Operation Cold Shade was just one of many, though apparently the most significant. The door opened, and Nolan Voss entered. In his early 60s, Voss carried himself with military precision, despite his expensive suit and cultivated appearance. His silver hair was immaculately styled, his smile practiced and hollow. "Good news, Aaron," Voss announced. "Your father has agreed to our terms. The Cold Shade files in exchange for your safe return." Aaron sat up straighter. "You've spoken to him?" "Better than that. He's on his way here now." Something in Voss's tone made Aaron uneasy. "And then what? You'll let us both go?" Voss sat on the edge of the desk across from Aaron. "That depends entirely on your father. If he cooperates fully, then yes, you both walk away. If not..." He shrugged eloquently. "My mother," Aaron began hesitantly. "Is she involved in all this?" "Diana," Voss chuckled. "Your mother has been playing a very long game, Aaron. Longer than you've been alive." "She's a Russian spy," Aaron said flatly. "I heard the federal agents talking." "She was," Voss corrected. "But Diana Mercer has evolved beyond national loyalties. These days, she's more of an independent contractor, with very specific ideas about global power redistribution." Aaron shook his head, trying to process this information. "So both my parents have been lying to me my entire life." "In different ways, yes." Voss leaned forward. "But here's what you need to understand, Aaron. Your father will be here within hours. When he arrives, things will happen very quickly. I need to know which side you're on." "Side? I'm just trying to survive this." "There are no innocent bystanders in this game," Voss said sharply. "Your father trained me years ago. Do you know what his first lesson was? Everyone is an asset or a liability. Right now, you're hovering somewhere in between." Aaron swallowed hard. "What do you want from me?" "When your father arrives, he'll have contingencies, multiple plans for different scenarios. I need you to help me anticipate them. I don't know how his mind works. But you know him as a father, as a man. That's valuable intelligence." Voss stood. "Think about it. Your cooperation could make this process much smoother for everyone." After Voss left, Aaron paced the small room. His world had collapsed in less than 2 days. The truth about his parents, the lies, and the danger he now faced closed in on him, forcing him to question everything he thought he knew. The father he'd known, the quiet, dedicated bureaucrat who coached his little league team and helped with science projects, was actually a government assassin. His mother, who'd organized charity fundraisers and baked cookies for school events, was a Russian spy turned international arms dealer. And now he was expected to choose a side. Aaron sat on the edge of the bed, head in his hands. There was one thing neither Voss nor his mother seemed to understand about Boyd Mercer. Despite his compartmentalized life, despite the secrets and the lies, Boyd had been a present father. He had attended every school event, every baseball game, every milestone. If the handler was as ruthless as everyone claimed, then what was Nolan Voss walking into by threatening his son? Miles away, Boyd Mercer prepared for war in the hunting cabin. Quan had returned from reconnaissance with detailed intelligence on the Argent compound, security rotations, access points, and most importantly, confirmation that Aaron was being held in the east wing of the main building. "They're expecting you," Quan reported. "Enhanced security, additional personnel. Voss has at least 30 operators on site now." Boyd continued checking his equipment. "Good. That means they're focused on external threats." "You're not seriously considering a frontal approach," Rousseau said, looking up from his laptop. "Even for you. That's suicide." "I'm considering exactly what Voss expects me to do," Boyd replied. "He knows me, or thinks he does. He's anticipating either a stealth infiltration or a negotiated exchange." "And what are you actually planning?" Quan asked. Boyd laid out a satellite image of the compound, something he won't see coming because it involves people he doesn't know exist. For the next hour, Boyd outlined his strategy. It was elegant in its simplicity, brutal in its execution. By the end, both Quan and Rousseau looked at their mentor with newfound respect and a hint of apprehension. "If this works," Rousseau said quietly, "Argent's security will effectively cease to exist." "That's the idea," Boyd confirmed. "Nolan crossed a line when he targeted my family." "And if Aaron is cooperating with them?" Quan asked the question directly, as was her way. Boyd paused in his preparations. "My son may be confused, manipulated, even coerced. But he's not a traitor." "You thought the same about Diana," Rousseau pointed out gently. Boyd's expression hardened. "I'll deal with that possibility if it arises. For now, we proceed as planned." As night fell, Boyd made one final call to Director Rollins. "I'm going to ask you something," he said when she answered, "and I need you to consider carefully before responding." "I'm listening." "Operation Windfall. Is it still active?" A long pause. "Boyd, that operation was shut down a decade ago. After Geneva." "Officially, yes, but we both know some protocols remain in place." Another pause. "What exactly are you asking for?" "Plausible deniability," Boyd said simply, "for about 12 hours. You're going after Voss. Whatever happens beyond that is incidental." "Rollins, there's a training exercise scheduled for the 10th Mountain Division tomorrow. Communications might be disrupted in certain sectors of Virginia as a result. For about 12 hours. Thank you, Sylvia." "Boyd," she said before he could disconnect. "Diana made a call after you left. We couldn't block it without revealing our surveillance. To Voss." "Yes. Whatever you're planning, they know you're coming." Boyd smiled grimly. "Good. That's exactly what I want them to think." At midnight, Boyd sent Quan to her position overlooking the Argent compound. By 2 a.m., Rousseau had completed his preparations and departed for his role in the operation. By 3 a.m., Boyd was alone in the cabin, making his final arrangements. He opened a secure case and removed an old satellite phone. Technology outdated enough to be invisible to modern surveillance, but still functional on legacy networks. He dialed a number from memory. "Authentication Sierra Echo Victor Echo November," he said when the call connected. A computerized voice responded. "Authentication accepted. Cold shade protocols activated. Awaiting instruction. Execute Protocol Lazarus. Authorization Boyd Mercer, the handler. Confirmation code 2-79 Alpha Delta. Confirmation code accepted. Protocol Lazarus initiating. Estimated completion: 6 hours. Boyd ended the call and destroyed the phone. Protocol Lazarus was his ultimate contingency, the controlled exposure of carefully selected parts of the cold shade files to specific intelligence agencies worldwide. Not enough to compromise his network, but enough to create chaos within the very organizations Voss was trying to manipulate. As dawn approached, Boyd drove toward the Argent compound in a nondescript van. In his earpiece, Russo's voice provided updates. Falcon in position. Systems breach complete. I have control of their security grid. Understood, Boyd replied. Begin Phase 1. He was 3 miles from the compound when the first explosions lit up the early morning sky. The Argent security compound erupted in coordinated chaos. 3 separate explosions along the perimeter fence triggered automatic alarms, drawing security personnel away from the main building. Simultaneously, the power cut out, plunging the entire facility into darkness for the critical seconds before emergency generators engage. In that brief window of darkness, Quan moved, positioned on a ridge overlooking the compound. She fired precisely targeted shots, not at people, but at key infrastructure, communication arrays, backup generators, vehicle tires. Inside the compound, security center operators scrambled to assess the situation. Emergency protocols activated, and armed teams deployed to the fence breaches, exactly as Boyd had anticipated. Nolan Voss stood in his command center, watching the security feeds with narrowed eyes. Unlike his personnel, he recognized the pattern immediately. It's a diversion, Voss announced to his second-in-command, Kendrick Foster. Mercer is creating chaos to mask his real approach. Foster, the lean man with a perpetual sneer, nodded. I've doubled the security on the East Wing. If he's coming for the boy, he'll meet resistance. He's not coming through the front door, Voss said dismissively. That's not how the handler operates. Check the maintenance tunnels, the ventilation system. A new alarm sounded. Fire suppressant systems activating in the West Wing, opposite from where Aaron was being held. Another diversion, Foster concluded. Voss wasn't so sure. Or a double blind. He wants us to think everything is a diversion. So we ignore the obvious. He grabbed his radio. Team Alpha, converge on the West Wing. Team Bravo, maintain position at the East Wing. All other personnel, initiate protocol Scorched Earth. As his orders were acknowledged, Voss turned to a secure terminal and began rapidly typing commands. Bring me the Mercer boy, he instructed Foster. It's time we accelerated our timeline. Outside, Boyd approached the compound not from any of the expected angles, but from above. A small, nearly silent drone, military-grade technology borrowed from an agency that would deny its existence, carried him over the perimeter defenses. Similar to a parasailing rig, but powered by whisper-quiet electric motors, it allowed him to descend directly onto the roof of the main building undetected. I'm in position, he murmured into his communication device. Meridian, status systems. Compromised, Russo's voice responded. I have eyes on interior cameras. Voss is mobilizing all assets. They're moving Aaron from his holding cell to the central command. As expected, Boyd replied. Falcon, external distractions complete. Quan, reporting. Moving to secondary position for extraction support. Boyd unhooked from the drone rig, sending it to its predetermined landing zone, and moved across the roof with practiced efficiency. A maintenance access door yielded to specialized tools, granting him entry to the upper level of the building. Inside, emergency lighting cast eerie shadows through smoke-filled corridors. Boyd moved like a ghost, his years of field experience evident in every silent step. The few security personnel he encountered were efficiently neutralized, not killed, but incapacitated with precision strikes. Alert, Russo's voice came through his earpiece. Voss has initiated some kind of data purge protocol. Their systems are systematically deleting and overwriting files. Can you stop it? Working on it. But this is sophisticated, military-grade security. Boyd continued his advance. Focus on locating Aaron. The data is secondary. Understood. He's being taken to the Central Command Center. 3rd floor, north side. 4 guards with him. Boyd changed direction, heading for a service stairwell. As he reached the 3rd floor landing, his earpiece crackled. "Handler, we have a complication," Quan's tense voice reported. Federal vehicles approaching from the main road. At least 6 SUVs, tactical teams. Boyd paused. Rollins had promised them a window. Either she lied, or someone else picked up their activity. Boyd considered the implications. Federal agents would complicate his extraction plan, but might provide useful confusion. "Maintain position," he instructed. "Let them establish a perimeter. We'll use their presence to our advantage." He continued through the 3rd floor, encountering increasingly organized resistance. These weren't typical security contractors. They moved with military precision, using tactical formations. In his earpiece, Rousseau provided continuous updates. Aaron is now in the command center with Voss and Foster. They appear to be. Wait. Report, Boyd demanded, ducking into an alcove as a security team passed. They're using Aaron to access something. Some kind of biometric system. Boyd's blood ran cold. Biometric systems required willing participation or extreme coercion. Either Aaron was cooperating or Voss was forcing his compliance. "Give me eyes in that room," Boyd ordered. "Working on it," Rousseau replied. "But their internal security is." "Wait, I've got it. Sending feed to your device now." Boyd checked the secure tablet in his pocket. The grainy feed showed the command center, a high-tech room filled with monitors and equipment. Aaron sat at a terminal, typing rapidly while Voss stood over him. Foster paced nearby, occasionally checking security feeds. There was no sign of physical coercion, but Aaron's body language suggested tension. Not a willing participant then, but not actively resistant either. Boyd resumed his advance, neutralizing 2 more security teams before reaching the corridor leading to the command center. Through the reinforced glass walls, he could see Voss, Foster, and Aaron inside. "Meridian, on my mark, kill all power to the command center. Falcon, be ready for rapid extraction on the north side, 2nd floor balcony." Both operatives acknowledge. Boyd waited, watching through the glass as Voss leaned closer to Aaron, saying something in his ear. Aaron's hands hesitated over the keyboard, then resumed typing. "Now," Boyd ordered. The command center plunged into darkness. In the momentary confusion, Boyd moved. The reinforced door yielded to a specialized breaching charge. Quiet, but effective. He entered in the darkness, his enhanced vision goggles giving him a critical advantage. Foster reacted first, drawing a weapon, but Boyd was already in motion. A swift strike disarmed the former British operative, followed by a precision blow that aggravated his old injury. Foster went down with a cry of pain. Voss was more prepared. As emergency lighting kicked in, he already had a gun pressed to Aaron's temple. "Right on schedule, Handler," Voss said calmly. "Though I expected you to use the ventilation system, not the roof. I'm losing my touch." Boyd stood perfectly still, assessing. Aaron's eyes were wide with fear, but there was something else there. Determination. "Let him go, Nolan. This is between us." "Oh, I don't think so," Voss replied. "Your son has been extremely helpful. Haven't you, Aaron?" Aaron remained silent, his gaze locked on his father. "Did you bring the cold shade files?" Voss asked. "They're in a secure location," Boyd answered. "Release my son, and we can discuss terms." Voss laughed. "Always the negotiator. But I'm afraid we're past that point now." He pressed a key on a nearby console with his free hand. "You see, while you were busy planning this dramatic rescue, Aaron has been helping us access something far more valuable than cold shade." Boyd glanced at the monitors, which displayed lines of code and schematics he recognized immediately. The quantum key encryption protocols from Halbright Technologies. The very project Aaron had been working on. Aaron has talents you never appreciated, Voss continued. He's given us complete access to next-generation military encryption. Cold Shade was just the appetizer. This is the main course. You're lying, Boyd said evenly. That system requires multiple authentication protocols. Aaron couldn't access it alone. Not alone, no, Voss agreed. But with his mother's assistance and some creative pressure. Amazing what a family can accomplish together. Boyd's gaze shifted to Aaron, who minutely shook his head, a signal. You've lost, Nolan, Boyd said calmly. Federal agents are surrounding the compound as we speak. Your operation is finished. A minor inconvenience, Voss replied. In 5 minutes, the data transfer will be complete. After that, it hardly matters what happens to this facility. The real victory is already secured. As Voss spoke, Aaron's hand moved slowly toward the console, unnoticed by his captor. Now, Boyd said, here's what's going to happen. You're going to release my son, and I'm going to allow you to live. One-time offer. Voss laughed again. You're not in a position to make demands, Handler. In fact, Aaron's hand slammed down on the console, triggering an alarm. Simultaneously, he drove his elbow back into Voss's stomach. The gun discharged, the bullet grazing Aaron's shoulder, but he was already rolling away. Boyd moved instantly, closing the distance to Voss before the man could recover. What followed wasn't a fight so much as a systematic dismantling. Every strike Boyd delivered was calculated, targeting nerve clusters and vulnerable points with surgical precision. Foster attempted to intervene, lunging from the floor, but Aaron, despite his injured shoulder, intercepted him, driving a knee into the man's damaged leg. In less than 30 seconds, both Voss and Foster were incapacitated. Boyd secured them with zip ties as Aaron clutched his bleeding shoulder. You came, Aaron said, his voice a mix of pain and relief. Of course I came, Boyd replied, quickly examining his son's wound. It's superficial. You'll be fine. Dad, they made me access the Halbright systems, but I didn't give them the real protocols. I created a backdoor, a virus that will corrupt their entire network once they try to use the data. Boyd paused, studying his son with newfound appreciation. That was risky. I learned from you, Aaron said simply. Always have a contingency plan. Boyd secured the room, checking that both Voss and Foster were thoroughly restrained, then activated his communication device. Meridian. Falcon. Change of plans. Primary extraction route compromised. We'll use Protocol Echo. Both acknowledged. Boyd turned to the computer systems, initiating a command sequence. What are you doing? Aaron asked, watching his father work. Making sure Voss's organization doesn't survive this, Boyd replied. The data you gave them. How long before they discover it's corrupted? Hours, maybe days. It looks legitimate enough to pass initial verification. Boyd nodded approvingly. Good. That gives us time. On a nearby console, Voss stirred, regaining consciousness. You can't stop what's already in motion, Handler, he said through bloodied lips. Diana has already implemented Phase 2. Boyd finished his work at the terminal and turned to face his former colleague. You never understood the difference between us, Nolan. You see assets and operations. I see the whole board. Meaning what? Meaning I activated Protocol Lazarus 6 hours ago. Every intelligence agency that might be interested in your operation has received selected parts of the Cold Shade files, specifically the parts identifying your network, your buyers, your assets, your infrastructure. Voss's eyes widened. You're bluffing. You'd never expose your own network. My network was extracted months ago, Boyd said calmly. When Diana first accessed the files, did you think I wouldn't have contingencies for that exact scenario? For the first time, genuine fear showed on Voss's face. The Russians are particularly interested in your recent dealings with certain oligarchs. The British aren't happy about Foster's activities in Gibraltar last year, and several Middle Eastern intelligence services are comparing notes about weapons shipments that were supposedly unrelated. Boyd checked his watch. "We need to move," he said to Aaron. "The building's security systems will reset in approximately 2 minutes, and we don't want to be here when federal agents breach the perimeter." "What about them?" Aaron gestured to Voss and Foster. "They'll face justice," Boyd replied, "though not necessarily the kind they're expecting." As if on cue, the facility's intercom system crackled to life, announcing a security breach at multiple entry points. Boyd led Aaron to the door, pausing to look back at Voss. "One last thing," Boyd said. "Diana." Voss managed a bloody smile. "What about her? Is she really the mastermind, or was that your idea?" "To make me believe my wife was more than just a turned asset." "Ask her yourself," Voss replied. "If you can find her." Boyd considered this, then nodded. "I will." Father and son disappeared into the corridor as the sound of approaching federal agents echoed through the building. The extraction from the Argent compound unfolded with practiced efficiency. Boyd and Aaron moved through pre-planned routes, avoiding both security teams and the incoming federal agents. Kwan provided cover from her position, eliminating surveillance cameras and creating distractions when necessary. Russo guided them remotely, monitoring security movements and bypassing electronic locks. Within 20 minutes, they had reached the extraction point, a service exit on the north side of the compound that led into dense forest. A waiting vehicle, driven by Kwan, whisked them away as federal agents secured the main facility. "How's the shoulder?" Boyd asked as they sped along back roads. Aaron winced as he adjusted the makeshift bandage. "I'll live." "What happens now?" "First, we get that properly treated," Boyd replied. "Then we deal with your mother." Aaron fell silent, processing the events of the past days. "Was any of it real?" he finally asked. "Our family." Boyd stared out the window at the passing Virginia countryside. "That's what I intend to find out." They arrived at a private medical facility, an unmarked building that catered to individuals who required treatment without official documentation. Boyd had used their services occasionally during his career, always paying handsomely for their discretion. While Aaron's wound was being treated, Boyd received a call from Rollins. "The Argent facility is secured," she reported. "Voss and several key lieutenants are in custody. But Boyd, Diana is gone." "Gone?" "She was under house arrest. The agents assigned to monitor her were found unconscious. Preliminary toxicology suggests they were drugged. Diana disappeared approximately 3 hours ago." Boyd processed this information. "She knew I was moving against Voss. She's activating contingency plans." "Do you know where she might go?" "I have theories," Boyd replied. "What about the cold shade information I released?" Rollins sighed heavily. "It's creating exactly the chaos you predicted. Multiple agencies are scrambling, assets are being burned, operations suspended. The intelligence community will feel the effects for years. And the Argent network being dismantled as we speak. Whatever Voss was planning, it's finished." "Not quite," Boyd corrected. "Diana is still out there. And according to Voss, she was the architect of their larger strategy, something involving nuclear materials." "Do you believe that?" Boyd considered the question. "Diana successfully deceived me for 31 years. I'm no longer certain what she's capable of." "What are you planning to do?" "Find her," Boyd said simply, "before she can implement whatever comes next." After ending the call, Boyd rejoined Aaron, whose shoulder was now properly bandaged. The doctor had recommended rest, but time was a luxury they couldn't afford. "I need to know everything," Boyd said to his son, his voice firm but gentle. This was just the beginning of another chase, and neither of them knew how it would end. "Every conversation with your mother about her charity work, every meeting with Voss or others connected to him, every unusual request she's made recently," Boyd said as they drove away from the clinic. Aaron struggled to recall details that had seemed insignificant at the time, but now took on new meaning. There was a charity event 2 months ago for nuclear disarmament. Mom was particularly invested in it. She introduced me to several military officials who seemed interested in my work at Albright. Names. General Lawrence Tanner was one. He oversees security at several weapons storage facilities, and there was a Department of Energy administrator, Patricia Hoffman. Boyd recognized both names. Tanner had been investigated for security breaches several years earlier, but cleared of wrongdoing. Hoffman had access to classified information about nuclear material transportation. What else? Mom maintained a private office in Georgetown, separate from her charity work. She claimed it was for personal projects, but never elaborated. I visited once. It had extensive security, which seemed odd for a civilian space. Address. Aaron provided it, and Boyd immediately changed direction. Meridian. He said into his communication device, "I need everything you can find on a private office registered to Diana Mercer in Georgetown." Within minutes, Rousseau had information. Property leased through a shell company 3 years ago. Significant power usage consistent with advanced computing equipment. Regular deliveries from technology suppliers. And this is interesting. Weekly visits from a specialized cleaning service that typically handles laboratory environments. Boyd's expression darkened. She's been planning this for years. Planning what exactly? Aaron asked. I'm not certain, Boyd admitted, but based on what we know about Argent's operations and the nuclear connection, it's likely some form of radiological threat. You think Mom is building a dirty bomb? Not necessarily. There are other ways to weaponize nuclear materials, more subtle approaches that would align with Diana's methods. They arrived at the Georgetown address, an unassuming brownstone, with discreet security cameras mounted at strategic points. Boyd surveyed the building, noting multiple entry points and potential escape routes. Stay in the car, he instructed Aaron. Dad, I can help. You already have, Boyd assured him. But from here, I work alone. Boyd approached the building cautiously, aware of the surveillance equipment tracking his movements. Rather than attempting to bypass it, he walked directly to the front door and rang the bell. If Diana was monitoring remotely, she would see him immediately. No response came. After a moment, Boyd produced specialized tools and bypassed the electronic lock. The interior was climate-controlled and smelled faintly of antiseptic. Everything was meticulously organized. The mark of someone who left nothing to chance. He moved through a reception area into what appeared to be a standard office, but his trained eye noted inconsistencies. Furniture that hadn't been used, decorations too perfect, an absence of the normal wear that comes with daily occupation. A facade, just like their marriage. Behind a bookshelf, he discovered a reinforced door with a biometric lock. It would be keyed to Diana's prints, possibly her retinal pattern as well. Boyd examined it carefully, then retrieved a small case from his pocket. Years ago, during what Diana believed was a romantic vacation to the Maldives, Boyd had created a complete biometric profile of his wife. A standard precaution for operatives with family members who might someday be used as leverage. He had never imagined he would use those materials against Diana herself. The synthetic fingerprint film worked perfectly. The door unlocked with a pneumatic hiss. Beyond lay what could only be described as a command center. Banks of computers, communication equipment, and specialized hardware that Boyd recognized as encryption devices. One wall was covered with maps and photographs, many showing nuclear facilities across Europe and Asia. Boyd moved to the central computer station. The systems were active, but locked. Another biometric scanner guarded access. Again, he used the synthetic materials, gaining entry to Diana's private files. What he found confirmed his worst fears. Detailed plans for accessing multiple nuclear storage facilities, transportation routes, potential buyers. But most disturbing was a file labeled Implementation Timeline. According to the schedule, Phase 2, the actual acquisition of materials, was to begin within 24 hours. Boyd downloaded everything to a secure drive, then continued searching the facility. In a back room, he discovered what appeared to be a laboratory setup, equipment for handling radioactive materials safely, including specialized containers designed for transport. His phone vibrated. A message from Quan. Movement at the west entrance. Female subject matching Diana's description. Boyd positioned himself near the command center entrance and waited. Within minutes, he heard the front door open and close, followed by soft footsteps. Diana Mercer appeared in the doorway, dressed in business attire, as if coming from a normal day at the office. She showed no surprise at finding Boyd there. "I wondered when you'd find this place," she said calmly. "It was only a matter of time," Boyd replied. "Especially after Voss was captured." Diana's expression tightened slightly. The first genuine reaction. Nolan was careless. Too focused on revenge against you to see the bigger picture. And what is the bigger picture, Diana? Nuclear terrorism. Blackmail on a global scale. What exactly is your endgame? She moved into the room, maintaining distance from Boyd. Rebalancing. The world's nuclear powers have maintained their monopoly long enough. New voices deserve a place at the table. By stealing weapons-grade material and selling it to the highest bidder. By ensuring mutually assured destruction applies to all nations, not just the privileged few. Diana gestured to the maps. Do you know how many countries secretly desire nuclear capability, but are prevented by international pressure? How many would pay anything for that power? I know exactly how many, Boyd said quietly. I've spent my career preventing precisely that scenario. Yes, the great handler, protecting American hegemony at any cost. Diana's voice took on a bitter edge. Even if it means harming thousands in Belgrade, or toppling democratically elected governments in South America, or assassinating scientists whose only crime was working for the wrong country. Is that what this is about? Revenge for my operations? Diana laughed, a cold, humorless sound. Don't flatter yourself, Boyd. This was never about you. You were useful. Access. Intelligence. Cover. Nothing more. The words were calculated to wound, and despite his training, Boyd felt their sting. 31 years of marriage. A child together. All of it a mission to you. For the first time, Diana hesitated. Not all of it. Aaron was unexpected. I wasn't supposed to get pregnant. But you did. And I chose to have him, she said defensively. Moscow wanted me to terminate the pregnancy. It complicated the mission. I refused. Boyd studied her face, looking for any sign of the woman he thought he had known. You loved him. At least. Of course I loved him. He's my son. Diana's composure slipped momentarily. That's why I kept him out of this as long as possible. Until Nolan forced my hand. By recruiting him at Halbright without your knowledge, Boyd guessed. Diana nodded. Nolan grew impatient. Saw Aaron as a shortcut to the encryption protocols we needed. I would have found another way. One that kept him clear of all this. And now, your operation is exposed. Voss is in custody. Your nuclear materials acquisition plan will never succeed. You think this is my only operation? Diana asked incredulously. Boyd, while you were focused on protecting America's interests abroad, I built a network that spans continents. Argent was just one component, a means to an end. She moved to a computer terminal, typing rapidly. Screens around the room illuminated, showing various operations and progress, financial transactions, shipping manifests, and personnel deployments. Even if your protocol Lazarus exposed part of our network, the core remains intact, she continued. The nuclear option was ambitious, I admit, but there are other ways to reshape global power structures. Boyd watched as the screens displayed evidence of an organization far larger and more sophisticated than he had imagined. Diana hadn't just been spying on him. She had been building something massive in the shadows of his own operations. Why are you showing me this? He asked. You must know I'll move against your entire network now. Diana smiled sadly. Because it's already too late. Diana shook her head. You know, that's not possible. We've always been on opposite sides, even when sharing the same bed. She glanced at her watch. My extraction team will be here in approximately 3 minutes. You should go. I can't let you leave, Diana. You don't have a choice, not if you want to minimize casualties. She held up the dead man's switch again. Besides, don't you want to save what's left of our son's world? The mention of Aaron struck home. Boyd weighed his options, calculating risks and potential outcomes, as he had done countless times in the field. But this was different. This was personal in a way no operation had ever been. Goodbye, Boyd, Diana said with finality. For Aaron's sake, I hope we never see each other again. She backed toward the exit, maintaining her grip on the switch. Boyd remained motionless, tracking her movement, but making no attempt to stop her. Just before she reached the door, a shot rang out. Diana jerked backward, red blossoming across her shoulder. Her grip on the switch faltered, but didn't release. Aaron stood in the doorway, Boyd's backup weapon in his hands. Mom, he said, his voice breaking. It's over. Diana stared at her son in shock. Aaron, you don't understand what's at stake. I understand enough, he replied. I heard everything. The dead man's switch, the attacks on infrastructure. You were going to collapse the global economy to sell to the highest bidder, to create a more equitable world. To create a more equitable world, Diana insisted, to ensure that power isn't concentrated in the hands of a few nations who believe themselves exceptional, to give voice to the voiceless. Aaron's expression hardened. By destroying the lives of billions, by causing global chaos and suffering. That's not justice, Mom. That's terrorism. Diana's eyes filled with tears, but her voice remained steady. Sometimes, Aaron, the greater good requires sacrifice. Sometimes, the only way to create a better future is to burn down the old system. Boyd stepped forward, his voice calm but firm. And sometimes, Diana, the only way to stop a monster is to cut off its head. Diana looked at him, a mixture of sadness and defiance in her eyes. You won't stop this, Boyd. The wheels are already in motion. You can't unsee what you've seen or undo what you've done. The world will change, whether you like it or not. With that, she turned and fled, disappearing into the night. Boyd moved to Aaron, taking the weapon from his trembling hands. You did the right thing, he said softly. Aaron looked at him, his eyes filled with a mix of relief and horror. Did I? I just shot my own mother. Boyd put a hand on his shoulder. You stopped a global catastrophe. That's something to be proud of. Outside, the sound of approaching sirens filled the air. Boyd knew that their work was far from over. Diana was still out there, and the countdown to global chaos had already begun. But for now, they had bought themselves some time. And time, Boyd knew, was the most precious commodity of all. One where power isn't concentrated in the hands of a few nations. By causing suffering for millions, Aaron countered. That's not equity. That's terrorism. Boyd moved cautiously toward Diana, whose wound was bleeding steadily. The switch. Diana handed it over. And we can get you medical attention. Diana's eyes darted between her husband and son, calculation visible even through her pain. You'll never stop what's coming. The protocols are already activated. Then help us minimize the damage, Boyd urged. For Aaron's sake, if nothing else. For a long moment, Diana hesitated. Then, with a defeated sigh, she carefully handed the switch to Boyd, who secured it with practiced hands. I never wanted him involved, she said quietly. Neither did I, Boyd replied. But here we are. As he secured Diana, Boyd contacted Rollins. I have Diana Mercer in custody. We have a global situation developing that requires immediate attention. Activate Joint Task Force Omega. Authorization code. Handler 769. Understood, Rollins responded. Extraction team en route to your location. Boyd turned to Aaron, who stood watching his mother with a mixture of anger and grief. "You should have stayed in the car." "If I had, she would have gotten away," Aaron pointed out. "Or you would have had to kill her." Boyd couldn't argue with that assessment. "How's the shoulder?" "Hurts less than watching my family fall apart," Aaron replied with grim humor. Diana looked up at her son. "I did love you, Aaron. That was never part of the mission. That was real." Aaron met her gaze steadily. "Maybe. But you were willing to sacrifice my future for your ideology. That's not love." As federal agents arrived to take Diana into custody, Boyd pulled Aaron aside. "This isn't over. Diana's network is still operational, and whatever she set in motion is already happening. We have work to do." "We?" Aaron asked. "If you're willing," Boyd nodded. "You've proven yourself today, and we need your expertise with the Halbright systems if we're going to contain this." For the first time in days, Aaron smiled slightly. Like father, like son. Boyd placed a hand on his son's uninjured shoulder. "Let's hope not entirely. I've made enough mistakes for both of us." Together, they watched as Diana was escorted to a waiting vehicle, her expression unreadable as she disappeared into the gathering darkness. 6 months later, Boyd Mercer stood at the window of his new office in a nondescript building in Northern Virginia. The view was unremarkable. A parking lot, some trees, other office buildings in the distance, but the work happening inside was anything but ordinary. The Joint Cyber Response Unit had been officially established 3 months earlier, following what the media called the April disruptions, a series of coordinated attacks on financial systems and critical infrastructure worldwide. Most civilians experienced it as temporary service outages and market volatility. But Boyd and a select few knew the truth. Diana's legacy lived on, and the fight to secure the future had only just begun. Few knew how close the world had come to a genuine catastrophe. Diana's network had been more extensive than anyone imagined. Her contingency plan had targeted vulnerable points in global systems, power grids, banking networks, transportation infrastructure. Without Boyd's immediate intervention, using information extracted from Diana and her command center, the damage would have been catastrophic. As it was, the response team had managed to contain the worst effects. Stock markets recovered after initial panic. Power outages were limited to hours rather than days. The global economy faltered, but stabilized. Diana Mercer had been charged with multiple counts of espionage, terrorism, and conspiracy. Her trial was conducted in secret, the proceedings classified at the highest levels. She received multiple life sentences without possibility of parole. Boyd had visited her once, 3 months ago, in the specialized detention facility where she was held. The conversation had been brief, unsatisfying. Diana remained convinced of her cause's righteousness, unrepentant for the damage she had done, except where Aaron was concerned. "Take care of him," she had said as Boyd prepared to leave. "He deserves better than what we gave him." On that single point, they agreed. A knock at the door interrupted Boyd's thoughts. Aaron entered, carrying 2 cups of coffee. At 29, he had changed in the months since the Argent incident. More confident, more focused. The boyish uncertainty was gone, replaced by a quiet determination. "The analysis came back on the Belgrade files," Aaron said, handing his father a cup. "You were right. Mom altered the original documents before sharing them with Voss. The civilian casualty count was exaggerated tenfold." Boyd nodded, unsurprised. Diana was always thorough in her disinformation. "It doesn't change what happened," Aaron pointed out. "But it does change the narrative. The official investigation is being reopened. That won't erase 30 years of operations," Boyd said, "some of which were exactly as brutal as Diana claimed." Aaron settled into a chair across from his father's desk. "Maybe not. But it might help people understand the context. The choices you made under impossible circumstances." Boyd smiled slightly. His son had become an unexpected advocate in recent months, pushing for a more nuanced view of intelligence operations while simultaneously helping design more ethical frameworks for future actions. "How's the new encryption protocol coming along?" Boyd asked, changing the subject. "Final testing phase," Aaron replied. "It incorporates the security measures we developed after analyzing Mom's attack vectors. Should be implementable across federal systems within 6 months." The work had been Aaron's idea, a comprehensive overhaul of government encryption standards built from his experience at Albright, but enhanced by what they had learned from Diana's operation. It was his way of making amends. Together, father and son were setting the foundation for a new era of security, one built not just on strength and secrecy, but on the hard-earned lessons of trust, accountability, and resilience. Though Boyd had repeatedly assured him, Aaron bore no responsibility for his mother's actions. "Director Rollins called this morning," Boyd mentioned casually. "She's proposing we expand the unit's mandate, not just response, but preemptive identification of emerging threats." Aaron raised an eyebrow. "You'd be back in the field." "Unofficially, of course." "Not me," Boyd corrected. "Us, if you're interested." Aaron considered this. A father-son intelligence team sounds like a bad spy movie. "It does," Boyd acknowledged with a rare chuckle. "But given our unique experiences, we're particularly qualified. And this has nothing to do with keeping an eye on me, making sure Mom's ideology didn't rub off." Boyd met his son's gaze directly. "I trust you, Aaron. You proved that beyond any doubt at the Argent compound, this is about using our skills effectively." Aaron nodded, satisfied with the answer. "In that case, I'm in, but on one condition." "Which is?" "No more secrets between us. Full transparency about operations, methods, everything. I won't repeat their mistakes. Theirs. Yours and Mom's," Aaron clarified. "You both compartmentalized too much. Created walls, even within your family. That's not how I want to live." Boyd considered his son's words. Compartmentalization had been central to his career, his identity. The handler had thrived by keeping information segregated, emotions contained, relationships controlled. But where had that led him? A marriage built on deception, a son caught in the crossfire, a retirement ceremony that dissolved into violence and betrayal. "Agreed," Boyd said finally. "No more secrets. Not between us." As they discussed the details of Rollins's proposal, Boyd reflected on the ironies of his situation. He had spent 30 years as the handler, managing assets and operations across the globe. Now, in what should have been his retirement, he found himself handling the most important asset of all, the truth, with all its complications and consequences. Diana had been right about one thing. Power structures needed rebalancing, but not through destruction and chaos as she had planned. Through transparency, accountability, and the painful process of reconciling with the past while building something better. Outside, the Virginia afternoon faded toward evening. Father and son continued working, planning for contingencies neither of them had imagined 6 months earlier. Not a perfect resolution. Too much had been lost for that, but perhaps something sustainable. Something real. And for Boyd Mercer, after a lifetime of facades, that was enough.